في أكثر الكتب.
Welcome back, everyone. Integrating Real Perspective, my film review corner. Tonight, I have decided that I wanted to take a new direction with my channel and start reviewing a series of films that would fall under the categories of erotica and sex comedies. This was something of a trend that had started back in 2006, which is when I started to become more idealistic in my tastes with cinema and started to watch more art house films that were unrated or X-rated, you know, what someone would generically describe as skin flicks. And to me, these films are a special niche that I embrace and cherish and treasure because they do have an artistic value in understanding the inherent beauty and sacredness of sex, nudity, and everything regarding the taboo in between all that. So I decided that the film I am going to review tonight is Swimming Pool, a 2003 French-British erotica film, the seductive and steamy fantasy film that I remember discovering as that trailer that I saw with the nude blonde appearing underneath the pool tarp and swimming under the leaf-laden surface of the pool. You probably know that film trailer if you've watched any movie that had come out from Focus Features that year, like Lost in Translation. You'll likely have seen that trailer in it. And so, from such a big studio like Focus Features, it's a film that kind of straddles the line between being mainstream and on the fringe of art house. It's personally, it was a real treat that I found this DVD for the generously low price of 99 cents at my wonderful treasure house, Mega Media, which have, of course, promoted in every one of my reviews for this channel. This is back in August of 2019. I had to pick this one up and see what all the mystery was behind that trailer. And that nude blonde that I noted earlier is the juicy, sweet French actress Ludivine Sangier, who plays Julia, the muse of crime mystery author Sarah Morton, who is played by the excellent British actress Charlotte Rampling. And Ludivine Sangier should actually be somewhat familiar for those um, who are watching this right now, and the name rings a bell, turns on a light bulb. She was in the Peter Pan movie, which I believe came out that same year, the live action Peter Pan movie that had Coldplay's song Clocks played in the trailer. So she's not really that much of an unknown. But before I get into her character, I should start out talking about Sarah Morton, Charlotte Rampling's character. Sarah Morton, for me, portrayed this wise, quiet teacher who was just the inner guide that I needed when watching this movie. The way that I read into her motivations, I believe that she came to see the swimming pool at her boss's summer home to be a symbol of erotic desires, a portal of hidden pleasures that are stored away in this safe, solitary privacy in the backyard of a house in the Paris countryside. I've often felt similar things about the swimming pool at my gym because I swim so religiously at the club. I also anticipate chance encounters with a hot blonde female lifeguard, much like Julie, one who is secretly flirty with me, yet hides in a very subtle way so as to just have me pick up on the sweet little hints of what she would like done in some fantasy of body worship, like giving a slow, sensual rub down followed by a tongue bath from her toes and up to her calves and thighs, etc. Now, while Sarah Morton starts off as rather moralistic and rigid at the beginning, it's clear that she keeps guard on a secret life that she feels the need to explore. She's tired of writing detective stories based on the same character and wants to make a clean break by going off into uncharted territory. And this is what happens when she's in the office of her boss, John Boslow, played magnificently by the British Renaissance man, Charles Dance. Yeah, and I had just reviewed Godzilla King of the Monsters recently. So yeah, that was partly the impetus for me to review this, was to talk about Charles Dance again. It was really interesting watching these two square off with each other as they both clearly had strong wills. Sarah says that even though she's swimming in wealth, making loads of money off her detective novel stories, she wants to do something different, something radical, provocative, bold, daring. She wants to mine the depths of her own inner world and have a conversation with her secret self. And I'm not saying secret self flippantly. One scene where she's on a train, and it's actually right after the opening credits. A passenger gazes up and notices Sarah, and right away says, "Excuse me, but aren't you Sarah Morton? It is you. I recognize you. Look, I'm reading your latest novel. I love it. I'm a big fan of Inspector Dorwell. I've read all your books." And then Sarah cuts in. "You must have me mistaken with someone else. I'm not the person you think I am. Excuse me." And then she just moves on, gets off the train as quickly as possible. This is like an author who has been known for writing cheesy soap opera stories who now wants to go against the grain of what the mainstream expects from her. And so her boss, John, Charles Dance's character, wants to be generous and gives Sarah a break outside of London by having her visit his summer home and to stay there and have a little retreat away from home in the remote countryside of Lacoste, France, for like a writer's retreat. And it gives Sarah a chance to be away from her ailing father, who she cares for. Not that he's really central to the story, or at least he's not present most of the time. I just thought I'd gather all the details of the picture that this movie is painting. And so once settled in, Sarah begins relaxing and enjoying the small pleasures like the food and the little town square village. She enjoys the peace and quiet and all the perks from being the only one there for miles around, with the exception of the house maintenance attendant, Marcel, who pays the occasional visit now and then. Well, actually, it is a pretty routine visit, to mow the lawn or to clean the pool. One thing that Sarah does do that seems pretty curious is that she takes down the cross hanging on the wall in her bedroom. While I didn't really look too deeply into that one detail in retrospect, I felt she did that because she didn't want her living and work environment to feel constricted by any puritanical vibes. And I would not blame her in the slightest, considering how she wants to set herself free and be wild and to explore the taboo. And so, after a seemingly tranquil and routine period where she settles in, one late night, while she's attempting to fall asleep, Julie arrives. And it comes as a shock to Sarah, since she was expecting only solitude with no interruptions, not even from John's own daughter. But for me, the arrival of Julie automatically becomes a feast for my eyes. She is yummy to watch with her wet blonde hair and her party clothes and just that really skimpy mini skirt, that jean mini skirt that she wears. It's just like, oh, wow. She like easy tiger. She's very friendly and sweet, though, to Sarah, despite being given a spiteful and rather hostile look from the older woman, which makes her taking down that cross all the more paradoxical because she does come off as rather conservative and judgmental initially. That is, but this is just her first impression of the free-spirited Julia. It's just like too much for her at first to really take in. And, this definitely extends to the fact that Sarah despises swimming pools, which, as you'll see later on, she has that whole combo with Julie while she's trying to write her book about how she just doesn't like swimming pools. And Julie even like tries at least holographically agreeing with her, saying that, yeah, it's not the same as like being in the ocean where you just feel like that sense of chaos where you're going to be swallowed and taken far out into the great wide blue with no sense of direction. But obviously she's just trying her best to be on good terms with Sarah during the time that she's staying there. Now, Julie says that she's staying at her dad's holiday house because she's currently unemployed and just relaxing in between looking for work. She's a cook or a chef who has great knowledge about food and has great culinary skills herself, although it's really not shown at all. I don't see her cooking any meals or hors d'oeuvres or appetizers, but she does talk about dishes that she makes that she loves to make with Sarah. I'm not saying that she cooks with Sarah, but she talks about like what she likes to make, what she likes to eat. So Julie's appearance seems, well, awfully Lolita-like, very girly, playful, sweet, and flirty. And this isn't the first movie that director François Ozon has cast Ludivine Sangier in anyway. She was also in Water Drops on Burning Rocks, and from the clips that I had seen of that, she has a very similar Gucci, cheeky personality that is very easy to like, and also one that brings a blush to the cheeks and a trembling, quivering of the breath. Like it's like my whole body just quivers when I see her incredibly ethereal beauty. Obviously, because Ludivine herself is a Cancer, that being her zodiac sign, Cancer sun, and a Libra moon, bringing that rather romantic vibe to her as well, which also instills that, quirky and, rather, um, at times forward sort of personality, but also one who likes to try to be very, very people pleasing as well. She's just unbelievably gorgeous that it's like watching a playful unicorn or satyr causing playful trouble with all the men who look at her and feel wooed by her, myself included. Guilty, yes. But I don't care. And even just looking at Ozon's filmography, he paints a very positive utopian picture of girls expressing their sexuality in shameless ways and men, feeling just all too happy to have this sort of woman in their lives. Like his 2013 movie, Young and Beautiful, which Maureen Vogt's lead female role is someone who's just awakening to her own blossoming sexuality for the first time as a 17-year-old. I think that's how old she is in that film. I gotta watch that film again. There's just a beautiful glossy look to Ozon's aesthetic. Like every frame almost seems like it's being shot in a glass museum and that there's like sunlight bathing through every bit of matter that is within each frame. Every person, every tree, every every house or room. I mean, the swimming pool itself in this movie just looks so surreal and just out of this world that it's almost like looking at each image through a prism, in which like the light just reflects and shoots out in all different directions and creates its own really unique architecture within the fabric of the movie itself. Just it's oh my gosh, it's beautiful. Like just reflecting and refracting light, making everything just look so heavenly. And this only serves to make the experience of the film almost holographic. It's like I can taste, touch, and smell, as well as see and hear the colors and textures in an all-encompassing, sensual experience. So, as an example of this multi-leveled sensual matrix that is swimming pool, there is a scene, an isolated scene, I'm going to be analyzing here. This scene is the one where Julie is lying on the edge of the pool, clearly enjoying her suntan. The camera begins to trace the contours of her body, feet, calves, feet, calves, torso, thighs, arms, and all the way up to her face and head as her eyes are closed in just blissful abandon. And she moves her head to her left. Her eyes open and she gazes upward. Then there is this man named Frank standing over Julie in his red Speedo. Frank is the owner of the cafe Sarah frequently visits in the town square. The camera moves up Frank's body And we see him looking down at Julie, clearly in heat and aroused at the sight of Julie's glistening body in her white bikini. And then the camera moves back down. Now Franck begins to have a bulging hard on in his Speedo and he begins stroking himself. As the camera moves down to Julie, now she begins to masturbate. And in this whole mutual masturbation scene that's going on, there is nothing but silence, just summer breeze blowing and the sound of these two blissfully moaning in orgasmic anticipation. It's like the whole scene begins to come out of my television and take up the entirety of my room, like an IMAX dome experience in 3D for the brain as well as the body to experience. The close-up resolution camera focus on the two people, I don't know if it was like a Nikon camera or something, but the radiant sun-kissed skin from that, crisp resolution of the lens, it almost seems to change the temperature in the room as well to where things get really hot and steamy. And it's clear that Ozon was creating a sexual reverie on screen in which my consciousness is linked with the two characters through the screen so that I can feel every touch sensation and felt sense the whole time. When Julie begins touching herself, my hand vicariously develops a felt sense of me touching her thigh and feeling the warm, tender sensation with a mix of moist and smooth, while feeling her goosebumps and little hair nubs from where she may have waxed or shaved. And of course, this serves as a prelude to the actual sex scene, which happens off camera, where we only hear Julie and Franck's moaning downstairs, and Sarah is taking it all in from her upstairs bedroom. The story doesn't really show any continuity in this scene here to imply that Franck followed Sarah to the house. This just seems like an isolated moment where Franck showed up one afternoon, knowing that Sarah lived there, but not really indicating some cinematic fugue where he had intentions to meet Sarah, despite Sarah being present at that cafe in town that she would always go to visit. But rather, this scene implies the symbiotic relationship between Julie and the pool. Like the pool is the secret domain that Julie inhabits, and that her presence emits an energy that attracts men in the nearby town. And they know to show up because she's a mermaid siren. Even the color white as the choice of color for Julie's bikini seems symbolic of the actress's zodiac sign being Cancer. She's embodying the Cancer archetype of the secret silver lunar goddess seductress who teases men like Franck and creates a path to this fantasy realm by the pool. And the water enhances the sexual tension oozing between the two. I almost imagine the first track off of Air's Moon Safari, that one that's actually titled, and just bear with me here, I believe it translates to the Silver Goddess. Um, and this song will be appropriate, I think, for this movie since Air are a French outfit. So, La Femme d'Argent, which translates to the Silver Woman. Well, I also see it translates to the Money Girl. And Sarah is a bit of a materialist herself, since, I mean, look at the way that she dresses in her party hardy, bratty clothes, for example, as well as the way that she just flaunts herself sexually. So it, maybe that whole album, Moon Safari, would be a perfect soundtrack for this movie, because the right from the first track, Julie is the silver goddess, and all the men are like these sexy boys. Just go listen to that CD right now, and you'll get the idea, because obviously I'm not going to try to sing any passages from any of those songs. But okay, moving on. It's like the style of foreplay is influenced by the way the pool shapes the behavior of Julie and the different men she has sex with. Like in one scene, she's coming home late at night, drunk from a club with a man, and she ends up in the next scene riding cowgirl style on the sofa chair. In another scene, she gives Frank a blowjob on the edge of the pool after a scene where the two are dancing with Sarah in a moment where the elderly author is starting to open up to her own sensual abandon and even smoking weed that Julie provides. And this also led to Julie getting jealous when Frank started showing more attraction to Sarah. Julie aggressively seduces Frank back by having him go skinny dipping with her, which then leads to her impulsively sucking him off. And then Sarah wakes up. By the way, this isn't the first time that Sarah wakes up like this, and walks to the edge of her balcony to see the action, only to throw a rock off into the pool, startling Frank enough to have him push Julie off as he makes his way out of the house, with Julie acting like a spoiled brat, tugging at him, begging him to stay, just sounding like an immature child. And then, like I said, Sarah then wakes up the next day, all flustered and sweaty, which, would be one of two instances where this would happen. So you can see that this movie does play around with that, with that line between fantasy and reality, between dream and real life, and just flirts along with the two sides of that line. And really, the whole film just shows how the creative imagination works to seek out new ways of, just digging into that well of stored knowledge inside the subconscious, and the pool being, this reservoir for the subconscious. Now, this is the turning point for Sarah as well. Julie's sexcapades begin to seep into her writing. At first, she tries blocking out all the sex sounds by wearing earplugs at night. Then she becomes a voyeur and decides to listen in on all the hot and wild action going on downstairs, leaving the earplugs out as she hears Julie's sweet moans, I mean the moans of the guys that she's like riding. And it's like listening to the ocean, if if you if the ocean created the soundtrack to some triple X soundtrack to Sarah's time there. And then, eventually her and Julie begin bonding in a way that reveals details about her life and her relationship with her dad. This is where a certain enigma about Julie begins to come to light here. details about her dad and his own debaucherous life, in which Julie shamelessly calls him the king of orgies, almost flippantly. Yeah, I can kind of see that, but this is Charles Dance we're talking about. Julie even talks about the first time that she had sex. She was 13, and she did it with a man named Christian. Now, I found this scene to be really cute because she refers to Christian as a boy who was just learning how to please and romance a woman. She says that he was a baby and didn't know how to do these things yet, and that she was too fast for him when he wanted him to take her. But she also regarded him as terrible because he came on her after 2 seconds. When she dumped him, he would write letters to her for a year, and, well, she wouldn't respond back. Would not respond back. And then there's Julie's mother, who is an even bigger enigma than Julie, since the mother is not present at all, not once throughout this whole film. Julie does talk about how, her father wasn't around much except when he was on holiday. Julie's mother, by the way, is also French, just like her. She is a romantic, or was a romantic, Julie's mother was, who wrote a novel of her own, a sort of Harlequin romance, except that, Julie's father hated it and attempted to burn it. And so, from the few impressions that I get about her mother, she was a bit of a hippie who, lived through the swinging London of the 1960s. Who knows? Probably her character showed up in that other French movie that came out the same year as Swimming Pool called The Dreamers. Um, but anyways, Julie's mother went to live in Nice, and then John, the father, left her for another woman and went to live in London, except that she would beg him to come back to her because she was terrified of being alone in that house. Well, and things do start to get a little bit more chilling as the movie moves on. But there's also a curious scar tissue on Julie's solar plexus that seems to give a clue as to her mother's disappearance. The scar is revealed during a scene where she's on the patio talking with Sarah about the difference between a swimming pool and the sea. How the sea gives that feeling of infinity where you could lose your step and be lost and swept away at any moment, while a swimming pool is just small and boring. And then Sarah even adds that it's like a cesspool of bacteria. But even that attitude changes when she begins to swim in that pool and begins mirroring Julie's rituals, like lying on the edge of the pool to tan, and then seducing Marcel the gardener. Oh boy. Did things turn gross when Charlotte started to show off her naked body. Ew. I did want to return to Julie's scar at some point in this review because it is a clue that will briefly foreshadow some terrible accident involving her mother. But I should jump back to Sarah's writing. At this point, Sarah stumbles upon what looks like a journal of Julie's. But it turns out this is the book that Julie's mother wrote. An old photo of her mother is actually found in between the pages. And this becomes the material that she uses to write her book. Franck actually ties into all this, especially when he goes missing the following day after he spent the night partying with Julie and Sarah. First, he doesn't show up for work. Then Sarah goes to visit his house, where we meet his daughter, who appears to have some degenerative aging condition that makes her appear to be in her 60s when the tone of her voice suggests that she's in her 20s and her early 20s at that. This this girl was a rather strange character to just appear, and she's inserted into a scene that lasts maybe no more than like 2 or 3 minutes. She has gray hair and very pronounced facial wrinkles, and she appears to be a midget. But her voice sounds girly and even coquettish. So, anyways, when Sarah asks her if she knows Julie, the daughter replies, "Yes, she's pretty." But then things take a very wild and jarring turn because she turns cold and defensive when Julie asks about, I mean, I'm sorry, when Sarah asks about Julie's mother, which is when she finds out that the mother is dead and that it was an accident. What kind of accident and the cause of the accident, only Julie knows. This is when Sarah gets home and she finds Julie lying on Sarah's bed. And when she gets up to meet Sarah, she looks possessed. She starts projecting her mother, her dead mother, onto Sarah in some transference episode. She looks distressed, yet full of gratitude, and even tears coming out of her eyes that her mother now has come back to her. Except that Sarah has to tell Julie that she's not her mother. And then Julie's eyes start to widen, and she begins trembling violently as reality starts seeping in, and she can't handle it, and she loses the one person that was her anchor point for this whole time. So now Julie begins crumbling to the floor and shaking even more. And then in her collapse, Sarah comes to her aid to try to snap Julie out of this hysteria. But then Julie finally calms down and faints in Sarah's arms. And then when she comes to, she reveals, when Sarah asks her what happened that got her into this hysteria, Julie reveals that she killed Frank by bashing his head in with a huge rock while he was attempting to leave in an attempt to escape Julie's hypersexual frenzy. And that Julie didn't really know why she killed Frank, that possibly she was doing it to help Sarah with her book. Now, Sarah has confessed that she likes her blood, sex, and murder, as Julie seems to acknowledge that it's what her publisher father wants from Sarah, and it's how he makes his money. So Julie must have been thinking about the amount of capital Sarah would gain from having a murder in her new book. So it makes me wonder now about why Frank was the one who had to die. When Sarah finally asks Julie how she got the scar, Julie reveals that it was from a car accident. Could it be that perhaps Frank caused the car accident, and that's why his daughter was very secretive about revealing that in the first place during Sarah's visit? Could be. The details are very scant and vague, and I think that's also what adds to the sense of blurring reality and fantasy together that is the whole foundation, the bedrock of this film, if there really even is a bedrock to this film, since it just feels like you're like being washed about in an aquarium, at times, or just kind of like free floating through the air, which I've often said about M. Night Shyamalan's work in the past too. But this is like a whole new level up from that. This is like next level up from that. And then there's that strange ending. When Sarah comes back from her retreat to submit her manuscript to John, and he doesn't like it, criticizing Sarah for saying that feelings are not her strong suit, she secretly has her book published by a different company ahead of time, a different publishing company ahead of time, who liked her more abstract approach to writing. Oh yeah, and did I mention that the name of Morton's new book in this type in is the title of this movie? Yeah, you probably figured that out by now. But just as Sarah leaves, John's real daughter arrives. Her name is Julie too, and she's blonde. But she's also British rather than French, and she has braces. And she's played by a different actress, Lauren Farrell. Uh, Probably not related to Mia Farrow, but who seem, this Lauren Farrow seems like an even more unknown than Ludivine Sangier is. Ludivine, after all, played Tinkerbell in the 2003 version of Peter Pan. Lauren Farrell has no other acting work other than showing up in the final few minutes of Swimming Pool. But she is cool to see just to provide an intriguing contrast, especially in that final sequence where the film teleports back in time through Sarah's memories to the house in the country, where Sarah is standing at the very top balcony, probably outside of her bedroom, waving to Sarah, waving to Julie, who I've been doing this a lot. Uh, Julie, who gets out of the pool, and there is, a waving back from her as well. So they're waving back and forth. And there is a switching back and forth between Ludivine's Julia, who clearly looks more dangerous, and Pharaoh's Julie, who seems like the type of girl I'd meet at the mall, perusing through the at the Barnes and Noble, perusing through like my favorite section, like the psychology or astrology or science fiction section of a Barnes and Noble. Well, she seems more of the literary scholarly sort like her father. So then, who was the Julie that Sarah met out in France? Could she be the neglected second daughter who takes on her mother's genes, while the more British Julie takes on her father's genes and therefore is more connected with her father, while the other is more estranged? I mean, in that scene where Sangier's Julie gets off the phone and gives it to Sarah, supposedly she was talking to her dad, who scolded her about bothering Sarah's peace. But when Sarah gets the phone to talk to John, the line goes dead. Was Julie even talking to anybody? Is there like some sixth sense shit going on here? Or is it that the French Julie was an archetype of Sarah's muse that manifested as mere fantasy, and the whole film plays with my mind and mixes up real and illusion? That's the popular theory surrounding that ending. And that's actually where the deleted scenes of this film are worth watching immediately following the film. The deleted scenes, oh boy, are they ever revealing. It's like 12 minutes of Easter eggs where it's like essentially the deleted scenes are a recap of the movie in miniature. And not once is Julie to be found. And the whole time, Charlotte Rampling looks more spry. She looks more cheery. There's like a scene where I think it's when she's looking through John's house and sees a copy of ins one of her books on the shelf, and she smiles. It was probably at a bookstore that she was visiting while she was in France too. It could have been that. But I mean, this is a very different looking Sarah than the one in the actual movie itself. I mean, there's even one scene where she asks Marcel if he's even seen Julie around. He's just like, no. And you know, um, as with Frank's daughter, he asks Marcel about Julie's mother, and of course, he's very guarded and resistant about giving away any information about her whereabouts. Yup. And how about that final scene with John Boslode, where he's gazing out the window of his office some 20 stories up? He's looking at a playground where the kids in the yard are playing, and the questions that come up are, is Julie amongst that crowd? Because I don't see her. So then who is John looking at or looking for? So yeah, my final thoughts. I love this movie. It seems like this movie could spawn its own mini series on the BBC, detailing the adventures of Sarah Morton and exploring the mysteries of Julie and the secret life of John Boslode. I also like how the credits have the same font and color design as the 1973 French animated film Fantastic Planet. I couldn't help but notice a loose connection there, even if the films only really share the same thread in terms of mood instead of appearance. It's very steamy and erotic, but in the most subtle ways. It flirts around with that line between danger and desire, and the secret playground of imagination where an author makes up the rules as to what is off limits and what is worth exploring, and the gradual process of letting go and submerging oneself into the pool of possibilities, creating the threshold of taboo, or crossing the threshold of taboos so as to unearth the treasures which result in a new creation that is bound to attract greater wealth and higher social status. So that's what I made of Swimming Pool. Well, that was how I interpreted the framework of this film. It really reads like a magical storybook with a lot of skin. It blurs a lot of lines in story structure to where it seems to jump around in narrative non-linearity. One moment, the play scene is innocent. The next moment, it introduces conflict and power struggle. Well, and it always keeps you guessing. Once you think you have the characters figured out, there's still another mystery that lies behind the facade, underneath the skin, beneath the surface of the pool of names and identities and inner lives. So, yeah, that's it. That's what I have for you. That's my review on Swimming Pool. And I definitely want you to get out and watch this movie for sure. It is definitely a must see. So whenever you can, definitely check out Swimming Pool, without a doubt. It's i- you'll have a lot of fun watching this film, especially if you love a lot of hot sex and a lot of full frontal nudity too. And so, as always, I'm promoting Mega Media Exchange here. Wonderful place where you can get discounted DVDs, Blu-rays, CDs, and video game stuff as well. Shout out to those guys, especially to I believe there are two Johns that work at that location, the one in Brookfield. So, shout out to you guys. Definitely also check out the link below for the Tantra School Ista that I am, trying to, make money off of my film content for so that I can visit that school out in Arizona. There is definitely a reason why I reviewed this specific film, and there are going to be a series of other erotica and sex comedy and romance films that are in the tantric Taoist framework of things. So stay tuned for those reviews that are coming up in the future. And as always, grateful to have you watch my my corner of the film review section on YouTube. And see you on the flip side of the reel. Ciao.